Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May 28th Curriculum Steering Committee meeting. And we have some agenda items. Evelyn, do you want to start off?
I will. I attached to your invitation a document that looks like a spreadsheet. And I don't think you can see anything that close, but it's the spreadsheet at the top. And across the top, it says Title I. And I list what we do at Jewett, what we do at Miles Lane, what we do at the middle school, and what we do district-wide for our Title I programming. And then our program supports our staff. It supports our instruction. And it supports for all three buildings and district-wide. And then Title II supports training and materials. And Title V supports classroom materials to support whatever we're doing for Title I instruction or intervention. So, and on the back of that sheet, I don't know if you had a chance to just look at real quick the sources of data that I collect throughout the year on feedback that goes into our plan. Every leadership team meeting that they talk about a need that they have for their building. All staff meetings, I read all the agendas. Administrative team meetings, we talk about what's needed district-wide and at each building. I have Title I staff team meetings, and then also PLC minutes. Review all of those on a weekly basis and collect information to go into our plan for the year. So as you can see on this spreadsheet, I've just outlined briefly the staffing plan for next year. And the biggest change for next year that we had from this year is at the middle school. And instead of having a Title I Ed Tech 3 in math and ELA, we hired a Title I math teacher to focus on grade 5 because we looked at the student data in grade 4 and that group coming up. And we know, having missed the last trimester of their direct instruction, we want to be sure we provide support and intervention for them as much as we possibly could. So Judy is going to be that Title I teacher. She's familiar with the middle school, with our math program, and she is going to be working specifically right in grade 5 to help work on math instruction. But other than that, the model for Jewett and Miles Lane and Ed Tech 3 for the middle school is what we have done the last couple of years. So I didn't know if anyone had any questions when you had a chance to look that over or what I just shared with folks. I didn't know, Todd, if you wanted to add anything about the plan for the middle school, how we're excited. We're going to have Judy come on board as a math teacher to really help that group and that grade level.
No, that was pretty concise. We're glad that we're going to have, not this current year, but the year before, Judy Frazier worked as an ed tech, focusing on math in the title program, and she was vastly overqualified for it. And so, she really she's a masterful teacher. And so to have her available to do more than what an ed tech does is a real asset to us. So
any questions on the model or the plan that we have for next year? No. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share that with you because we're getting that ready, getting that put in place for, as you know, we have that week of June 7th to the 12th that teachers will be looking at transition plans. So to have this in place is a huge help for the middle school. So that's my overview, Linda, for our ESEA plan.
That must have been a lot of work, Evelyn, getting to that data all together.
Evelyn, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Evelyn?
Yes.
I was just thinking, since she's already in the district and moving into a new position, she'll be available to help during that week you just spoke of. I was just curious. So for teachers who are leaving, so all the teachers are going to just work together in looking forward to next year. How is the transitioning piece happening for the new hires as well as the teachers who are leaving?
The teachers that are leaving, we're asking them to participate so they can provide all of the information they have on students and be part of our current teams. We have not finalized the 5 days of that week yet. That is the main agenda item for next Wednesday's 18 meeting. And I have invited all of the new teachers that are new to the district you can see a little later on here, I have phonics training at kindergarten coming up June 10th. And our new kindergarten teacher has been invited and accepted to be a part of that training. And then June 15th and 16th, we have Cheryl Toby, our math coach, working at Miles Lane in the Jewett School on math training. And all of our new teachers that are at Jewett and Miles Lane have been invited to that. And then in June, the grades 5 through 8 training, the new math teachers at the middle school have been invited to be a part of that. So we'll have an overlap of our current teachers and our new teachers for the June 10th training. And then the new teachers are invited to be a part of all the training we have from June 15th on. Does that answer your question, Jen? Okay, good.
So when you described that, Evelyn, did that pretty much cover what you had on the agenda for the training, or is there anything else you wanted to elaborate on?
No, just that, as you all may be wondering how we're going to do that training is all after June 1st. And the guidance that we have right now is not to have groups larger than 50. And none of our training comes anywhere close to that. We will follow all the main CDC and national CDC guidelines. And the phonics trainer on June 10th, she's very excited that we're willing to host her in person because she really wants to come and see people. They're going to get into their kits. And so she was excited and very comfortable following the guidelines that are in place for all of us. And also, we are connecting each of our facilitators just like this via technology in case we do have a teacher that's uncomfortable, even though we'll be 6 feet apart and doing all the cleaning and everything. We will make that available for anybody that is not not comfortable coming in for the training. And then we do the same thing on the June 15th and 16th training. That will be in person and also a computer connected to Cheryl doing that training. So if anybody wants to participate in that training remotely and with their small group teams, they will be able to participate if they're not comfortable coming in person. So that was the only other piece I wanted to add to that training agenda item, Linda.
I have to say that it's wonderful we have the technology to do that, but I love coming to the new to you teachers orientation to just to say hello to them and give them my little diatribe of how much a cheerleader I would be of the district. But I suppose I could do that online too. But yeah.
And I have the dates on here for the new teacher class just so folks can get them on their calendar. I can't even hazard a guess on what our training will look like and the format it will take by August 21st, but we're doing 3 different plans. If we can be in person, I have 10 people that are currently going to be in the class, and we can spread out and do that in person. Or we can do it like this asynchronously, because fortunately I have met all 10 new folks either with technology or they did come in for second interviews with Jim. So I've had a chance, and many of them were in constant contact with them via email because they have questions, they're taking courses, they're getting familiar with our curriculum. So we've had wonderful conversations already with many of those 10 teachers. But it will still take place. I'm just not sure exactly what format it will be in.
So, Evelyn, when you and I spoke this morning, was there something that Todd wanted to speak to us about other than what he was referring to?
Yes, he has on the agenda, he has an updated daily schedule for the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Todd's going to share with us, because we all know how challenging that middle school schedule is every year.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share with us, Todd?
I would love to share if I could find the unmute button. Yes. So, I think most of you are actually pretty familiar with the middle school schedule. And this is tonight is in reference to more like the daily bell schedule than sort of like the overall master schedule of like slotting classes in and that sort of thing. But for my entire principalship, and I'm pretty sure for Mr. Tripp's principalship, and maybe going back to Mr. Braun, the middle school has had 9 periods a day that are about 40 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And of those 9 blocks, 2 of them are ELA, 2 of them are math, 1 is science, 1 is social studies, 1 is a special, 1 is lunch and recess. And then 1 of them has been what we call an intervention block. And that's been scheduled into a student's schedule as a class. So, depending on the grade, like 6th period would be a student's 40-minute intervention block. And all the 6th graders would have intervention at that time. And all the 6th grade homeroom teachers would be teaching intervention at that time. And then 7th block might be the 8th grade intervention block for all the 8th grade students and all the 8th grade teachers. And so we've been trying to do intervention and RTI, which is, when students are below grade level, providing interventions, tracking how students respond to that, and then adjusting the intervention so that if it's not working, you don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. If it is working, you keep doing it. And it's really, it's one of those things that it kind of makes sense when you see it on paper, right? Like all the kids and all the teachers are available, and you make intervention groups and you provide intervention during that time, and it should work. But the reality, after trying to slice and dice that as many different ways that we can, is that it just really hasn't been effective. And it hasn't been effective for a couple of reasons. One of them is, it's like I said, it's by grade. So if you picture our average grade that has 80 students and 4 teachers, and of those 4 teachers, usually 1 is a math teacher, maybe 2, depending on the grade, 1 is an ELA teacher, maybe 2, and a science and a social studies teacher. If the math teacher says, I really need these 6 kids to work on a specific skill, and the ELA teacher says, I need these 6 other kids to really work on a specific skill, and then the science teacher says, I need these 8 kids, and the social studies teacher says, I need these 7 kids. Well, you've put 25 out of 80 kids in intervention, and then you still have 60 kids to figure out what happens with them. And what has happened is that they kind of get like randomly distributed. So any given teacher during intervention has the kids that they really want to do targeted intervention with, and then a bunch of relatively random kids with no purpose to be there. And even the most well-behaved, independent student, 8th grade, middle school students, that's just not a great situation. The other thing that's been problematic is we've located our music elective classes during intervention, And so one of two things happens. Either kids who need intervention get pulled out of the opportunity to participate in an elective that is really meaningful to them, or they go to that elective and they, like they're 2 years below in math, but they're going to choir and band every day, and so they don't get the intervention. So that's been problematic. And when we got the JMG grant last year, it was actually after the end of school, so it was in June. So we kind of were, under the gun to figure out where to put that. And so the easiest place to put that was intervention. So then you had like a three-way conflict between, kids had to choose, or teachers had to choose between intervention or music or JMG. So it wasn't working. If you recall, back in November, we had someone come in by the name of Pat Quinn, and he did a in-service day training for us on RTI. He wrote that book that was called The Ultimate Guide to RTI, and it was actually it was a very good in-service training, and a lot of the teachers commented, like, oh, that was one of the better trainings I've had in like the last 5 years. They felt it was very practical, very useful. And so we used that as a launching point and had been having conversations since the November in-service days up until the middle of March about how to improve our RTI system based on that. And then obviously that work kind of stalled out in March. But one of the decisions that we made is that we need to do intervention differently than the way it has been. And so one of the big changes that students are going to see next year, assuming that they come back to school and nothing else has interfered with how they experience school. But our plan is that they're going to come back to school and they're going to go down to an 8-period day. So they'll have 8 periods instead of 9. And we felt that 40 minutes of intervention was too long. That, if you're talking about like a really quick hitter around a specific skill that kids needs work on, having that be as long as a class is not ideal. And so we shortened intervention. We shortened a chunk of time to 25 minutes, and it's going to be a school-wide intervention. So every kid and every teacher will be available at the same time, and it'll be shorter. And what we think that's going to let us do is a couple of different things. Number one, it's going to, like, all the math teachers will be available at the same time. So if we look at our NWA data or classroom assessment data and decide that there's a certain skill that, like, if we could just really focus on this skill for 6 weeks, a lot of our kids would be better off. Instead of just having like the one math teacher at that grade available to work with kids, we can pull all of our math teachers together to focus on a specific thing. We could pull all of the ELA teachers together. We're also going to have all of our specials teachers available, so that overflow that had been created in the past, where like the random TEG kids that had nowhere to go ended up sitting in the back of the math classroom because they had to go somewhere. We can now have a place for them that maybe is either a little more targeted. Maybe we can find some enrichment or other opportunities for those students who don't need, like the kids who are above grade level and everything and don't need intervention. We'll have some ways to find some enrichment for them. And it's going to be one focus. So everyone will be doing intervention, and it won't be that struggle between like chorus and JMG and intervention. So that's one change, is this shortened school-wide intervention block that we think is going to let us do RTI and interventions better. The other big change that students will notice, and they won't notice it at first, but when you make a schedule, every class goes somewhere. And so if you're the kid who has math first thing in the morning, and you're not a morning person, and you're not really fully awake and in the flow of the school day until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, having math or ELA or a class first thing in the morning might not be that great for you. And on the other side of the coin, there's plenty of our students that by the end of the day, like sitting down for 80 minutes worth of math or ELA or 40 minutes of science is not Not something that works out very well for them. But the way that schedules are traditionally done, like if you have math in the morning, you have it in the morning all year long, regardless as to whether that's the best place for you to have it. But we got looking at our schedule, and I don't know how to describe it. I could show you the spreadsheet that is our schedule, but usually when I show people that, it takes like half an hour to explain it. So I will not do that unless you want me to. But if you look at our schedule, there's what I call lanes. So like blocks 1 and 2, every kid in the school is either doing ELA or math, or they do science and social studies, or social studies and science and flip halfway through. It's like the same thing, blocks 3, 4, and it gets a little funky in the afternoon, but the same, like there's 3 tracks in our schedule. And so what we're going to do, instead of doing a daily basis, which some schools do, they have what's called a rotating or a cascading schedule. We're going to do it by trimester. So like the whole first trimester, kids' classes will be as they're scheduled. But then when we get to second trimester, if you have math first thing in the morning, it'll flip to the end of the day. If you had ELA at the end of the day, it'll go to the middle. If you had science and social studies in the middle, it'll go to the beginning. And then we'll go to third trimester and it'll do the same thing. So every student will have every class at every point in the day. So like one way to look at it is that no one is going to be stuck with having, math at the end of the day all year long. Another way to look at it is everyone gets stuck with having math at the end of the day for part of the year. So like shorter periods of less ideal time, and kind of spread more equitably across the student body instead of a certain group of kids just kind of ending up that way. So that's the other big change. And it's worth noting in conjunction with the other one, because as I mentioned, music classes and JMG are not going to be part of intervention. So we're gonna put those in the schedule at certain times, which we've been reluctant to do in the past, because like if I put 7th and 8th grade band 4th period and you have science 4th period, that means that you miss 1 or 2 classes of science every week all year long, and you get substantially less academic time. But if our schedule rotates like that on the trimester, you might be in a class that gets hit for a trimester if you get pulled out for band, but then your class is going to move to a different schedule, and it's not going to impact it anymore. So it really sort of like dissipates the impact on academic classes of putting music and JMG in the schedule and not in intervention. And so we think that that'll be a better solution. It won't force kids to choose between intervention or music. It won't force kids to choose between an academic subject and music. So we hope that that'll open up access to those programs a little bit more. So I have a couple more things to add, but I'm gonna pause there because those are like the 2 big conceptual changes, and see if people have questions or feedback on that.
Anybody have any questions, comments for Todd? I can't hear Andrea. Can everybody else hear her?
No, she's not muted, but I can't hear you, Andrea. Oh, and now we can't see you. Oh.
I still can't hear you, Andrea. I'm sorry.
Maybe, yeah.
Oh, she's going to log back in, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting for her to come back. Oh, Jen has a question.
So I'm assuming that means those kids that do band and choir. I'm trying to think how this has worked in the past. They would not miss
Like I had
a
them on
class,
before.
or it would be at the same time, but
It-
or
it would
they
be-
would miss
it'd be
one of
spread
each,
out.
or how does that
Yeah.
work?
They're spread out, so it's not.
I don't know.
We also talked about, in consultation with the music
Do you
teachers.
hear me? Okay.
We thought that just given our staffing resources, that we should, we really need 2 lessons a week for the instrumental music program, but that the vocal music program could do okay with 1. And so instead of having that weird overlap day where, you know, every kid that did choir had it one day, but then only some of them had it a second day, and the same thing with band. So what you really had was you had a full band one day and a half band another day, or a full choir one day and a half choir another day. So we gave band like 2 dedicated slots so they could have their full band, and choir 1 dedicated slot so they could have their full choir. And they're not in competition.
So
like, a kid could
if
still
if
do
a student
band
does
and choir.
both, they would be missing 3 classes, but they wouldn't all.
They
2
wouldn't
of
all
them
be
would
the
be of
same.
one type, and
Yeah.
1 would be of something else.
Correct. It wouldn't like all be block 3, so that, you know, their ELA class would get decimated for a trimester. It'd be like 1 would come out of math, 1 would come out of ELA, 1 would come out of science or social studies. So
For a whole trimester?
So not
Yeah.
even the 2 bands come out of the same class.
I don't think so. I'd have to look on the schedule real quick, but I don't think they would come out of the same class.
And
I think we tried to stay away.
One
from
more
that.
thing, the JMG you're referring to, the JMG group that you're referring to, is that the class for everyone, or is that the
Yeah, good.
there's
That was one of the
there's 2
points I was
kinds,
going to
right,
make.
for the middle school?
Yeah, that's one of the points I was going to make in a second. So that's the core class. So that's that small group of like 15 to 20 kids in a grade that are doing the entire JMG experience. And then still in 7th grade, we have what we call JMG Plus, which is a very narrow slice. So like they were, you know, I think they were just starting financial literacy when we went to remote learning. They did study skills and organizational skills and communication skills. So that still is in the specials block. So that's not a pullout. And we actually expanded that to 6th grade. 6th grade had some space in their specials block. So there's actually going to be a 6th grade JMG Plus component next year as well. That isn't going to be in place of anything. It's just we were able to slide it in. So that pullout from academics will only be the core.
Did you have a
Right.
question?
Yeah. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. That's just anyway weird. So on this new plan, does the flex grouping go into it at all? Is that still? Because I remember going to a meeting last year about that
yeah.
for, and I
Yeah.
thought there was something about this was the year that, you know, you were trying things last year, and this was the year some of it would be implemented, or.
Yeah, we tried a lot in the fall. The biggest challenge with flexing, honestly, has been like the 5th and 6th grade standards in math in the Common Core. It's not, the Common Core standards are like a K-5 group and then a 6-8 group and then a high school group. And that change doesn't line up. And so it's
Okay.
not, it was really challenging across grades to, like, it didn't spiral the way it does at Miles Lane, where like the same concept, like a fractions or
Well,
something.
what about the 6, 7, 8? Does that, or no?
It spirals more in math, yeah. Just kind of the way that we've set up our staffing, it's tougher to do a 6, 7 flex would be almost impossible. And then 7, 8, as they move into the high school, we haven't talked about doing that yet. So we found that like two 5th grade ELA classes or 2 6th grade math classes that happen at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of places throughout this last year where we were able to look at that as
Yeah.
2 teachers, 35 kids, divide them up as needed and shuffle it and flex that way. But what was really hard to figure out was the multi-grade whole
What about within the
whole
grade?
grade flexing.
What about within the grade? Like within the 7th grade or within the 8th grade?
Yeah, where they line up, it works. But just like in 7th and 8th grade, we start getting into teachers who are certified by content area and not generalists.
Yeah.
And so when you have departmentalized teaching and not self-contained teaching, it's hard. Like I can't have all the teachers teach math at the same time like they do at Miles Lane because they're not all certified.
Yeah, to do that.
7th grade math teachers sort of thing. So it's just like it's hard. It's different and more difficult in that sense of like kind of like picturing the Miles Lane model. It's harder to do, but what we've done through like workshop model stuff as well as places where we have common classes booked together, that's been happening and can continue.
I think if there was, I mean, I don't know except for with my kids and my kids' friends, but there's going to be, I can imagine what coming in the fall is going to be for some of those teachers. Because if there was a wide span before,
yes,
I think
it's
the
wider.
last 3 months is just accelerated it. Like, I know there's kids doing a lot of work and I know there are kids doing nothing for whatever, for millions of different reasons. So I just can't even wrap my mind around what that span is going to be when they come back,
Yeah.
And how to make that fair so the kids that did all the work and teachers that assigned work and got done, and then how to help the ones who just couldn't get the work, didn't do the work, how do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing, Andrea, that we've done differently this year than in the past, kind of the overriding principle in creating homeroom groups at the middle school in the past, I don't know how long, but I think for multiple years has been sort of like a heterogeneous grouping of kids in a homeroom, and that one of the goals is to have that grouping be heterogeneous. We've looked into something called cluster grouping, which is not homogeneous grouping. So it's not like saying, oh, let's take the top 25% and make them a class and the bottom 25% and make them a class, but more thinking about when you think of academic clusters.
Yeah.
And it actually comes out of the GT programming is, at the very least, make sure all your GT kids are clustered together in the same homeroom or have that subject that they're identified GT for at the same time. So that they can be together as a group when they're receiving that instead of, in the past, in that heterogeneous paradigm, it's kind of like spread them out equally. Now it's not, don't put all the GT kids and the next group, bunch of like really academically motivated kids together, but at least make sure that, there's more than 1 or 2 together in each class, that it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And that there would be some sections that maybe skew a little bit stronger academically, and some that skew a little weaker, but there's no there's no group that doesn't have any strong students.
Yeah.
And there's no group that doesn't have any weak students. But so it doesn't get rid of the range, but it turns it up and makes more obvious groupings in the classroom. So that's
That makes sense.
when teachers group kids, we ask them to do it with that in mind this year, and we'll see like what it actually looks like in the classroom.
That makes sense.
You know, like one of the pieces of feedback from Christina when she did it, she had a really hard time because she did it on academic sort of ability, which was what I asked her to do. But she said, you know, when we do it with this one group, there's all these kids who are above grade level, but they have really bad work habits. You know, like they're smart, but they don't do the work.
Yeah.
So you probably don't want to cluster them all together. You know, like it makes it look like it's a strong group, but it's not really.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try it and see how it goes, and you know, but I think you're right. You know, I think we're all really aware that the range is going to be big, and the answer is not just to like make sure that every classroom has, you know, someone at every level in it, that there might be other ways to do that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So Jen brought up the JMG point that I was going to make. The only other thing I wanted to mention is you don't need to know the details of it, but we do have some pullouts for electives. Like all of our kids get phys ed twice a week. And so like there's no way to fit all that into the specials block. And so they've always ended up coming out of somewhere to get that second phys ed. We worked really, really hard this spring to be strategic with those pullouts and do it in such a way that there's going to be one block a week where every ELA teacher and the literacy coach have a common prep, because all their kids are going to do those extra specials at the same time. Before, they were just kind of like scattershot throughout the schedule, and teachers had random extra prep periods. Now for ELA and math, we lined them up so that whole team can meet once a week. And we did the same thing for math, and the math coach is going to have the same prep time. So we've created a 40-minute block every week where those teams will be able to meet and talk about things like filling the curriculum gaps that were created from this spring, adjusting groupings as we go along, adjusting curriculum as we go along, and figure out what kids have learned or not learned or retained or lost over this long break. And so I think that that's going to actually be really helpful. You know, it's like a little extra PLC that we found each week, not by doing anything, not by adding anything, but just by like jumping through hoops with the schedule to be really strategic about where those landed.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Todd, I'm in awe. I just can't imagine all these moving parts and trying to connect them. It must be like not even as hard as it's probably harder than Rubik's Cube, you know, trying to line everything up. And just my hats off to all the hard work that goes into it and trying to take every student's needs into account. So hats off to everybody who works so hard at making this schedule. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we thought it'd be important to share it with you guys, just because like the kids' day will look a little bit, you know, we can just picture that first day of the second trimester when people's classes move and like, you know, they all go home and tell their parents, oh, I have math in the afternoon now. And, you know, that we'll communicate that ahead of time. But we just wanted to make people aware of those changes as well, because those are pretty public changes when kids get off the bus and their whole schedule is switched a little bit.
Well, what do you think, Evelyn? What's up next?
Well, I know Jim wasn't able to be here tonight because he's at the town council meeting and our school budget is on their agenda tonight. And there's a couple of things I wanted to update you from that perspective. One, you've heard Todd talk about math instruction. And I don't know if you remember back early last fall, we shared with you that one of our big activities this year was to look at and review different math curriculum, because on December 30th, the online resources and support for the current Math in Focus program is going away because that company has a new Math in Focus 2020 out, and all of their energy is going to supporting that. And they had to find somebody that was on the original team 10 years ago to figure out how to turn on and refine all of our online resources so teachers could have those resources for this year. So in lieu of that, knowing that our online resources are all going away, we won't have time to review all the curriculum and have a thorough review of that before the school year. So, excuse me, those 2 days in June that Cheryl is working with the Mars Lane staff, there's an online math program called San Francisco Math that she has brought in a lot of units for the teachers to supplement their instruction. They have really liked it. And those 2 days, one of the key pieces, not only looking at mathematical instructional practices, they're going to be looking at a couple of the beginning of the year units in that San Francisco Math to find all the online resources. And so when all that goes away December 30th, our math instruction doesn't go away. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. Our goal is to start, our first goal is to get the school year up and going. But after that's up and going, we will have a review process to look, because believe it or not, our current math program, K-8, Math in Focus, is now 10 years old. So it's time to update it, time to look at it. We have a wonderful math coach that has experience in many, many different math programs. And because of that experience, she's helping them find the resources and pull together information. So they will have a lot of information and units ready to go in the school year and not worried about losing their online resources. So that's one of the key pieces she's doing in June with them. Another big piece that Jim is very excited about, and you would have heard from him, you've heard Todd talk about the intervention and finding out what instruction students are going to need. Teachers need a place to organize these new math units, and it's called a learning management system, LMS. That's a piece that we do not have here in our district that pulls together all the curriculum, instruction, and assessment pieces, and then also pulls in our district and classroom assessment for teachers to look at. So under Jim Morrow's direction, the last 3 weeks, the month of May has been reviewing 4 different online learning management systems. He is now putting together a survey. We've had teachers from every school level, from every content area, and administrators participating in these demonstrations for us to make a decision on one system will work and meet the needs best for our district. And once that is put in place, we're very excited because that's where you can start documenting and keeping track of student progress. Some of them we've looked at. There's a place for students to do their electronic portfolios. There's a place to house all the common assessments. So, for example, the new teachers we have coming in this year, if we had the system in place a year ago, they would walk in, log on to our learning management system, and the curriculum would be right there for them. So it's a huge undertaking. It has a very short timeline. Jim has really pushed Jim Morrill to get the decision made by June 1st and to get the system up and running and available for August. So in August, as part of the CARE funding, we can support teachers to give them time to go in and start looking at the system. We're going to take it step by step. I know the first year, if we can get their first unit organized and on this management system. All the resources that they collected and put together for this remote learning opportunity, they can bring all those over from the Google Classroom, from the Seesaw that the K to grades 2 did, and have a place to start storing and organizing all of our learning. So that is the biggest piece we're doing district-wide right now. And as soon as you hear which one has been selected, we'll start sharing. We've looked at Brightspace, which was the one we just saw this week. And that's a whole brand new online system that the University of Maine system and the community college system is going to be adopting next fall. We looked at Canvas, which some of our local districts and also Hudson University is using. We looked at Schoology, which is what schools that use Power School instead of Infinite Campus, they're going to, and some of our neighboring districts are going to Schoology. And then we looked at Infinite Campus to see if that could expand, but that really didn't meet the needs of organizing a learning management system. So staff have been very busy participating in those demonstrations. We call it, they've all had sandboxes. They're playing with these systems in a sandbox, trying them out, seeing what they do, and then they're going to give us all feedback. So that's been going on for the month of April and May, while teachers are also been working on their remote learning and distance learning. So it's been pretty remarkable, all the work that everybody's done. So I just wanted to give you a quick update. You'll be hearing more about that. And so by the June school board meeting, we should have Jim reporting out on what system was selected and the plan to support teachers and what we hope to be able to do to support them, get the training up and going for them to start that system. So that's a piece that's been missing in our system and very excited. And that's been one of Jim's priorities with this CARE Act funding that has come available, is to use that for this management piece. So as Jim says to all of us, he said, I do not think we will have a school day again because everything is going to be available remote and students will have access to their learning. All students will have access to their learning. So it's kind of an exciting time and yet frustrating because we don't know what comes next for that instruction. So there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, and I just wanted to give you as much of an update as possible and know that hopefully looking forward to our June board meeting, you'll have that information available. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, but do you have any questions?
I just have a question. What did you say about the Math in Focus? Like there's going to be a whole new program coming on?
They did have a new one come out this year, Andrea. It was called Math in Focus 2020. And that company has put all of their resources and energy into supporting and developing all their new online tools. And they informed us that all support for the 10-year-old Math in Focus program that we have, all of their online support is going away December 30th of this year.
So does that mean our school is in the market for a new program, and that's what
we
you
were
said?
going to be this year anyway? This spring,
Okay.
we were going to be going through that review process, but we put that on hold when we went to distance learning. So this is what the elementary school has put in place, and I'll be working with Justina and talking with the math teachers when they have their June training, reminding them those online resources are going away. What do we need to put in place for them to be able to continue with our current Math in Focus? And I would assume, I know I hear good things about the Math in Focus 2020 will be one of the 4 or 5 we'll be previewing to making a decision to go forward after this next school year.
Okay, so that will be for like the next year, not for
Yes.
this. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
It's really interesting to possibly change, and I'm not opposed to it, but leaving Math in Focus if that's what happens, because I'm thinking all of the test scores and data that we've collected, and we're just starting to find, not just starting, but the administrators worked really hard finding those pockets of those areas that the kids were lacking in, and it kind of brings to question in my mind, if we start with something different, will we be taking any steps backwards and trying to trying to think of the right word, but continue the momentum that we've been on as far as finding those deficits if we switch to another program? That's just a comment. I don't expect, any answers, but that does come to my mind. Because
And that will be part of the criteria when we review the other systems, Linda. And we're very, very fortunate that our staff have been working so closely with Cheryl this whole school year and really understanding the mathematical instructional practices they want to see in a new program. They know the content of the Math in Focus, but they are really much more savvy now what they're looking for in instructional practices. So they will be able to ask those questions and have a much more in-depth review of the systems that we'll bring in and look at.
Yep, that makes sense. Yep, thank you. Anybody else have any questions about that? No crickets? Okay. What would we like to talk about next, Evelyn?
I think those are the big ones. That's what's been taking our time. I mentioned the CARES Act funding. Jim, Katie, and I are working on pulling all that together, getting the data. That's the funding that came in from the federal government to the state, and then the state has released it to the school districts, and it has to be, all expenses have to be directly related to the COVID-19 expenses. So we have been future planning, trying to think of all the plans that we might have to get ready for next fall and be sure that we budget and plan for those and include those in the act. And our goal is to have our CARES Act grant submitted by the end of next week, because once that gets approved, then we know we'll have that federal support for a lot of this work that we're doing. So the CARES Act, the learning management system, and the upcoming training are my big district updates, Linda.
You could see my mouth move, but not the words.
I know what you meant.
I didn't unmute, but thank you. Yes. Does anybody else have anything to add to this meeting that they'd like to share or comment, questions?
This is probably not a question for just in general. Do you know what's going to happen with summer school? Like, is that any?
Thank you for asking, Andrea. That was the major topic of this week's administrative team meeting. And we have decided that as a district, we're going to go forward with a remote-only summer school. And we're going to move it back. Usually, traditionally, we do it in July, but we're going to move it back to August because we've heard from our teachers and from our families that they're going to need a break. And we think that we would have a better follow through on recruitment if we're able to wait and do that and have more direct focused instruction, getting those students ready to come back to school in August, than taking a few weeks off now, bringing them in July, then having another month, and then bringing them back. So that's the plan we're working at. The principals are working on identifying some students that would be doing that. Jim is working on a letter. He hopes to have it ready to go out to parents to, again, update everybody, reminding them the last student day is a week from tomorrow, Friday, June 5th. The plans for our summer school are delaying to August, reminding everybody the school nutrition program will be available this summer and people can come in and pick up their food. And I think just the fact that we thank everybody for all their incredible work that they've done, families, staff, everybody district-wide and community-wide to support students in this. And we look forward to their support and patience on whatever comes our way and what school looks like in the fall.
Yeah,
So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think most kids do need some type of break before more remote learning, Probably teachers too.
Yeah.
But from what I see on my end, kids do too,
Well, and we have appreciated that feedback from everybody because it does make sense. I know usually people like to have a break before school starts, but I think they need a break after school this year.
Also, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you'd like to cover tonight, Evelyn, or anybody else?
Only if you have questions, and your questions keep reminding me, oh yeah, we got to update you on this and that.
Mhm.
So summer school was the other big thing we talked about this week. So
Can I just add on to the summer school piece that break also gives us a better opportunity to like reflect on remote learning that, I mean, we've been pretty much in the busyness of making it happen for 10 weeks, and we haven't had a chance to step back and say what didn't and what would we do differently if we could do it again. And so I think when we do remote summer school with a little bit more break, we can also design it a little differently to maybe emphasize some of the positive pieces of the last 10 weeks and learn from some of the not as effective pieces. So
Very good point, Todd. Yeah, I worry about the mental health of everybody, our teachers, our administrators, our students. So Evelyn, are we looking for a meeting in June?
I haven't had, and I asked administrators this week, they don't see any agenda items on the horizon. I think, again, we'll finish up the school year. And the other thing, I didn't know if anybody had any questions about our year-end celebrations. Every building, Jewett, Mars Lane, the middle school, and of course the high school graduation all have plans in place to have year-end celebrations. And we work with public safety, so they're an integral part of that and supportive of the plans that we have in place. And I think in June, if we need one, I'll be in touch with you. But I think, as you've seen, the big topics, we're going to be focusing on the learning management system. As Todd mentioned, reflecting on the remote learning, what went well, what can we do different, and then maybe I'll need one early August instead of late August this year to kind of update everybody on the summer school plans. And after August 1st, we should have a better idea of what the fall school year will look like.
Okay, then we'll wait to hear from you what your thoughts are. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Does that conclude our meeting for this evening?
It does, if nobody else has any other questions. I thank everybody for your time tonight because it helps updating everybody. And like we say, administrators, we have to have a weekly meeting because everything changes so fast right now. So
I always enjoy this conversation, so thank you very much, everybody, for the work.
absolutely.
Okay.
And enjoy this beautiful weather we're having. So
Yeah. Next time you see me, I'll be tan. Really,
there
I
you
won't.
go.
I'll be pasty white, but it's good weather.
In your mind, you will be, Linda.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.